Excited to be
Uh,
here. Thank you.
you're very welcome. EksAyn Anderson, that's your name?
Yeah, and you're one of the few people who can say it right. Most people try and they get off that you said it perfectly. It's XAN, and I got to tell you, my wife calls me X, and I always joke around. It's probably not a good thing if your wife calls you X, but I'm my wife's ex, and we're married. So,
That's awesome, man. Well, just to get us started, you wrote a book. You've just wrote one book, or how many books have you written?
well, I've written a couple, and I'm working on a third. Um, was there one you were interested in?
Yeah. The one I was thinking of, things I want my children to know before I die.
Yeah.
That's a pretty important one to me because my mom passed away almost 10 years ago now, about 9 years ago, and I was, let's see, I was 30 when she passed away. So one of the things that I thought about not too long after her passing was, man, mom never really taught me how to live without her. And so I've since then I've been telling my children, my job as a parent is to teach you how to live without me. And that just hit home. So when I read the title of that book, I was like, man, that's I need, maybe I should write a book, but I have the podcast here, so I talk to my kids through the podcast. I talk to my wife through the podcast, and it'll live on long after I'm gone. So, can you tell me a little bit about that book?
Well, that's great. And you and I have more in common than as well. So thanks for bringing it up. You know, my let me tell you a story here. When I was young, I used to like to draw trees, and I used to draw them with every leaf, every branch, even the veins in the leaves. I went to school later and I saw how the other children drew trees. And you might remember just a lot of children just drew with two lines and a poofy cloud on top. And so when I saw how the other children drew trees, I stopped drawing them the way I used to, and I started drawing them the way the other children did. And my mom, when she saw this, she cried. Um, Fast forward, I was at a little league game. A few years later, I'm 8 years old at this little league game. And by the way, there's a few different ways to play uh, little league. You can either be good and hit the ball, or you can be bad and just hold the bat out and let it drop. Um, I'm not here to tell you how pathetic I was at Little League, but something happened after this. My mom complained of a very severe headache, and my dad became concerned, and he said, "We're going to take mom to the hospital." And I remember standing there in the front room of our home, giving my mom a hug, saying, "I love you, mom," before my mom and dad drove away. Well, I was a little bit concerned, and I went to my uncle, who just happened to be visiting us at the time, and I said, "Is my mom going to die?" And he said, "No, she's not going to die. She probably just has a migraine." And I said, "Do you promise my mom's not going to die?" And he said, "I promise. She's not going to die. She's going to be fine." And I wanted to believe him. I went downstairs and I climbed up on my bunk bed and I started reading this book. And I waited for my parents to get home. I waited and they didn't get home. Well, next morning I woke up, I was a little anxious. I walk out wanting to see my mom and dad. And I opened the door to my room. There's kind of this long family room outside of my room, and I could see my dad on the other side of this family room, but something was different. My mom was not there. Instead, there was a neighbor and another neighbor and a friend and another neighbor. It seemed like half the neighborhood was at our home. And as I approached, got a little closer, I could see that my dad had been crying. And as I got even closer, my dad threw kind of gathered the children together, and he said, uh, through his tears, and he was trying not to cry, but through his tears, he choked out the words. He said, "I think our mom is going to leave us." And I started to put two and two together. Um, I said, Dad, we got to do something. We got to do something. Well, I got to tell you, my mom had suffered a cerebral hemorrhage, which means a blood vessel in her brain had burst. She was now brain dead at the hospital, being kept alive by a life support system. A couple days later, we're sitting at the hospital. I could see my mom on this hospital bed with tubes coming out of her nose. She's got her chest rising and falling with the help of a machine. She can't breathe on her own, so the machine has to breathe for her. And I got to tell you, I was scared. And came time for them to take my mom off the life support system. There was nothing they could do. She was brain dead. And when they did, she kind of crinkled up. She turned bluish. I wanted to give her a kiss, but I was afraid to because she didn't look like my mom. So I went and faked one and then walked out. Well, I got to tell you, my mom died that day. And as an 8-year-old boy, I watched her die. And this is my question for you and for your listeners here. How do you think I draw trees now? And the answer
Probably the
is
way your mom wanted you to.
the way my mom wanted me to, the way I see him. And I got to tell you, I'm sharing my heart with you right now today, figuratively, in this very moment on your podcast, which I'm honored to be on. I'm drawing trees the way I see them right now. And my mom did keep a journal, but I wish I wish I had even more of her thoughts and thinkings. And that's why I wrote the book, is because I thought, um, you're right. You gave me tingles when you said we're trying to teach our kids to be okay without us. And that's really the goal. We want them to be strong enough spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, that they can do it without us, because at some point we're not going to be here. And our kids are going to see a time likely that we'll never see. And so that's such an important thing. Thanks. Great question.
Man, as you're telling me that story, I'm kind of getting goosebumps myself because that's but when I found out that my mom had passed away, it was one of those things where they didn't come right out and say it. They said, you know, we're on our way to mom's house. She's not responsive and her lips are blue. And to me, I thought, well, okay, she's going to be okay. She's going to be okay. And I got that phone call about an hour later. She said, "Mom's gone," and I lost it, man. I was totally unprepared for it. My mom had my mom's a very strong lady, and she had some health issues for probably 15 years or so prior to passing away. And so she was in and out of the hospital. And so I could, we kind of knew her time was limited, but I didn't, I just took it in stride. I took it for advantage, that my mom was going to be there for me to talk to the next day.
Yeah.
And I was totally unprepared for her passing. And then when I got that news, it just hit me like a ton of bricks, man. And I was still borrowing money from my mom for gas money. You know, I, I, uh, my oldest son lived 2 hours south of me. So, uh, during times of financial hardship, I kind of lean on my mom and be like, "Hey, mom, you got 20 bucks I can get for gas so I can go down and get my kid?" "Oh,
Mm.
yeah, sure, sure," And so that was one of the thoughts that stuck in my mind is, you know, who am I going to call to get gas money now? You know, and it just when I heard the title of that book, I thought, man, I say that all the time. I tell my kids all the time, hey, my job is to teach you how to live without me, not be your best friend. We've got time to be best friends. Right now, I need to teach you what to do and how to do it. And I think that with society being the way it is now, we don't really focus too much on the nuclear family or fatherhood, being a dad, being around for our kids. And so that was one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, is because, fatherhood is a big deal. And we need to tell fathers and get them excited. We don't have to be boring dads. I'm not a boring dad. I don't consider myself a boring dad. But
I'm sure you're not.
we've got to be fathers and step in there and do our jobs. And one of our biggest jobs, is to teach our kids how to live without us.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, being a dad is one of the greatest opportunities you possibly can have. And let me just give you an idea. I mean, I love what you said there. Dads have more influence than you think. Let me give you one example. I'll sometimes ask people. I'll say, "Hey, do you know what your great great grandfather did for a living?" And most people I've asked that to can't tell you. Remember, this is your grandpa's grandpa. Now, you've got to realize like you have two grandpas, okay, and you have four great great or great grandpas, but you have eight great great grandpas. So you have eight of them. So even if they can name one or maybe even two, most of them can't name anywhere near to all eight of what their great great grandfathers did. Now, the reason I ask them that is because I say, do you care if they had the coolest horse? Do you care if they had a really awesome Mercedes Benz plow? No, you don't. Nobody cares. And the truth is that what we do as for a living, likely our great great grandchildren just aren't going to care what we did for a living. But the kind of parents that we were is going to go down for a long time, even if it's not recognized by them. Let me give you one example. I live in the United States of America. Okay, now why? Well, I'll tell you why. I had great great grandparents, fathers, and mothers that decided to come across the ocean from Europe to the United States. Some of them came a while ago, some of them came hundreds of years ago. Well, that decision that they made as a family back then now affects me today. Like I speak English instead of Swedish or some other language. There's a lot of different languages, you know what I'm saying? I speak English because I'm here. It affects my religion, it affects my educational opportunities, it affects my economic opportunities. So many things are profoundly affecting me today, even though I don't really think about that choice that they made hundreds of years ago to come here, right? Now, that's an obvious one because it's geographic. I mean, they got on a boat and they sailed from Europe to America. Okay. But what about other things that aren't as obvious but just as real? Were they kind? Were they not kind? Were they checked in, checked out? Were they drunk? Were they angry? Were they whatever that is? All of those kinds of things can be passed down for a long time as well. And so what we need to realize is like if you and I were to build a business, we could probably build a rock star business together. And that business in 10 years, maybe 20 at the most, would probably be bought, sold, bankrupted, disrupted, not even relevant anymore, even if it was awesome for a while. But the kinds of dads the kind of people that the things we do in our own home, that's going to go on for generations, generations, generations. So if you want to make an impact, if you want to be someone who's going to leave your mark in the world, go home and love your children, go home and love your family, go home and be a good family guy. And it doesn't mean you can't say, well, you know, some people say, well, I'm not perfect. I made some mistakes. Just do your best today. I mean, let go of that and start doing the best you can today. Right.
Hell yeah.
And anyway,
I absolutely 100% agree with that. I'm a stay-at-home dad. I've been a stay-at-home dad for, gosh, it's almost 11 years now. And how I got to be a stay-at-home dad was I worked away from home. I was on the road, hard labor job, and I was gone 5 days a week, and I come home on Saturday and Sunday and not want to do a damn thing when I got home. I didn't want to spend time with the kids unless they were all in the living room watching TV with me, and I got to be a big old fat fuck. I was 500 pounds, and I wasn't active, and I just wasn't somebody that the kids could look up to, but I wanted to spend more time with them. I missed out on so much. And so I got fired from this job, and I told my wife, I said, I just want to take a break. I want to stay home with the kids, and I want to do the dad thing for a little bit. And that couple of month break turned into 11 years. So, what had happened was my wife had figured out that she wanted to go to college, and logically thinking, well, you have a better earning potential than I do, so you go do that and I'll stay home with the kids. And it took a while to get through school, but she made it. She graduated, and we had just decided that the situation at home was just too perfect. for me to go back to work. And then we had another kid. So, something else we have in common is I've got four children, ranging in ages from my oldest is 21, my youngest is 5. So, from what I understand, you have some age separation between your kids as well.
Well, I've got kids ranging from 7 to about 20, and
Yeah.
still have 4 at home as well. But I'll tell you this, you know, that the choice to spend more time with your kids, however that is a choice that, in my opinion, will pay dividends. Um,
Oh, it certainly already has. The biggest thing that I can say about being a stay-at-home dad is the time that you spend with them, but also the time that you have available to them. The time that you may not necessarily be around, but that you can be around if needed. And that's where I have all the time in the world. If somebody needs me, I'm never too busy to go hang out with the kids or pick them up from school or do this or do that. For the most part, I love doing that stuff, and I think availability is one of the best things that you can have as a parent. What's your opinion on that?
oh, I agree. I agree that, there was decades ago they had this thought about how it's not quantity of time, it's quality time. That's just not simply true. You've got to have the quantity because you've got to be available. Now, for those dads who are out hustling and working and going to work, one of the things I found that has helped me is when it's time to come home, if I stop for just a minute and I try to shift gears, because let's be honest, work can be exhausting. It can be mentally taxing, physically taxing, depending on what kind of job you have. But if I literally would just stop and, to be frank with you, I'd just say a prayer for each one of my kids before I'd walk in, just to stop and say, hey, help me to be a good dad, help me to shift gears, please bless. And I name my children by name and just stop for a minute, walk in. That would help me so much rather than if I'm still kind of in work mode where you're kind of, in that anxious hustle, trying to make stuff happen, and then walk in and just be that, be present, be available with your kids. And one of the best ways, in my view, and I'll tell you, we got to be careful about it these days, is devices because they can rob so much time. You can waste so much time on a phone or on a video game or sometimes you just need to sit down and just listen to your children. Let the phone ring, put it in the other room. The people can wait. You're with your
Yeah,
children, let them wait and be there present with them. You know what I'm saying?
I absolutely agree with that 100%. And I'm guilty of that. So, I spend a lot of time on my devices as well. And that's one of the things that I'm conscious about as I'm doing it. Like when my kids come in the room, I'm on my phone or whatever, and they start speaking. I'm cognizant of the fact that there's two things going on, and I also most of the time I choose to put down that phone unless I'm on the phone. But
Yeah, and it's a
um,
challenge. I got to tell you, it's a temptation. The people who design these phones, I got to tell you, they are there are scientists out there that are trying to get you addicted to your phone, to
absolutely,
social media. And because the more you're addicted to whatever it is you're on, the more ads they can sell, the more this. And so they're literally, so it's an uphill battle. You literally have to say, I really am wanting to be on my phone, but I'm going to put it in the other room. I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to just be present. And it sometimes that takes some doing, but if you're committed to it, you don't regret it later if you're spending that time with your children for sure.
yeah, like going out to eat, with my wife. And actually, with the whole family, I caught myself doing it. I caught myself getting on my phone. Like we're in the middle of a restaurant and we're staring at each other. Like what the hell do I got my phone in my hand for? And as soon as I caught myself doing that, I took my phone and I put it in my pocket, and I didn't really pay attention to anyone else that was on their phone. I was present in that moment, and
Good for
that's
you.
a big thing for me is being present in the moment. We go all on a lot of
Awesome.
vacations. We go out to theme parks and stuff like that. I don't like having my phone in my hand because I like living in the moment, and
Yeah.
people ask me, they're like, "Well, did you take lots of pictures?" And I'm like, "No, not really." Well, why? Why didn't you take a lot? Well, I was there. That's why. I don't, it's
Right. I've had that discussion. Yeah, exactly. My wife's good at taking pictures. I'm kind of like you, where I'm like, let's just be here. And my wife likes to take pictures, which later on I'm kind of glad she did. But at the moment, I like to just be there. So
right. Exactly. And interesting thing that you had said when you get off work or when you're whatever you're doing outside of the house, you take a beat and you say a prayer and you switch gears. That is very, very important to do. And I preach that to everybody, all the people that I know. If they're struggling with that work life balance, that's one of the things that I always tell them to do. Stop when you leave work or sitting in the driveway. It doesn't matter where it is or how long. You just take a second and breathe. And then after you do that, take a second to reflect on the day and take that work hat off and switch back into home mode and go in and say hi to your kids. And nobody likes being attacked when they first walk in the door, like, hey, there's a million things going on. But everybody loves that love, affection, and attention as soon as they hit that door. They don't want any problems. They don't want to deal with your home problems. They want to see the kids, they want the family. And so I always tell everybody, take that beat, take that second and take your work hat off and put your home hat on. That way, you know, you don't leave that stuff at work. And then when you come home, leave that stuff at home as well. Don't take that stuff to work with you. And
right,
I,
great,
I
great
often,
thought.
I often tell people that all the time.
It's a great thought. And one of the things I've noticed, if I'm really excited to see my kids, so you take that moment and you can go and be like, "Hey, I'm home," and give them a big hug, and they kind of becomes you can start a little bit of an excitement piece, if for those who are, when you're getting home. But great thoughts on that.
Absolutely. And so tell me a little bit about your childhood. How many brothers and sisters did you have?
Well, I grew up in a large family. So my mom, when she passed away, had seven children. And the
Wow.
youngest the youngest was 7 weeks old when she passed. And my dad was 34 years old with seven kids, a widower. He remarried and they had another child. So I have a total of eight brothers and sisters. And that was a good thing. I got to tell you now, when we go to family reunions, a lot of people, I'm actually really grateful for this large family I came from, because my children have all these cousins that they love. And I feel sometimes bad for people who don't have as many kids, because I'm like, gosh, we have so many friends that are cousins. I think my dad has around, I want to say 55 grandkids right now, but it's always increasing.
Wow.
So when we have a family reunion, it's a real to do. And so great question.
Yeah, I was curious on that because you were 8 when your mom passed away, and you got into that a little bit. Her youngest was 7 months old. That's
7 weeks,
seven
7 weeks.
weeks old. Oh wow.
Yes. Still,
I
still
could
breastfeeding.
I couldn't even imagine, man. I couldn't imagine what that would be like for your dad. And he must have been a hell of a dad for you to grow up and have kids of your own and preach the fatherhood thing.
My dad is a great man. I want to honor him. He's a great man. And obviously after my mom died, things weren't always smooth. There was misunderstandings. There were things that were rough sometimes. But overall, I just got to tell you, my dad did a great job, and he raised a great family. And I'll always be grateful for his good example. My dad right now is a great man. He's yeah, but that's in answer to your question. Wanted to let you know that. While you were talking, though, I had one thought come to mind. It's a little off subject, and if you don't mind, I could
Oh, go
just
ahead.
just bring this thought up. I talked to a policeman not too long ago, and this policeman had said that most of the people that he takes to jail, over 90%, are people who did not have dads present in their home. And I thought that was really interesting. Now, that doesn't mean if you don't have a dad present, you're going to go to jail. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying there is a little bit of a correlation between having a dad figure in the home and people going to prison. There was a wise man who said something like this. He said, if we don't fix marriages and families, everything else we do will be like straightening deck chairs on the Titanic. Did you hear that? And I probably misquoted it, but it's something to that effect. If we don't
Yeah.
fix marriages and families, everything else we do will be like straightening deck chairs on the Titanic. And I believe that's true. And let me just tell you what I mean. Some people think that something out there is going to save us. Like when I say that, I mean like, okay, so the government, this politician's going to save us, or that politician's going to save us, or we need this political party or that political party, or we need. And I'm not saying, by the way, politicians can do a lot of good or harm, but the truth is there's some things that government can't fix,
Yeah.
right? And they have to be fixed at a different level. I mean, if you have great leaders, but nobody's learned how to treat each other in their home. I mean, I watched a guy, and I won't go into too much detail because I don't want to dishonor this guy, but this guy was being violent, and he did something. He's been violent for a long time, and he got sentenced to 26 years in prison because he was so violent. And when I looked him up, I later found out that he did not have a dad in the home. Okay. Well, it's probably going to cost over 100,000 a year for the system to put him in jail. And by the way, the financial piece is not the most important piece, but I'm going to use the financial because it's easy to measure. Okay. So you can
Right.
say the spiritual, emotional, mental piece is much more important than the financial. But let's talk about the financial piece for a second here. If it costs millions of dollars to put this guy away for 26 years, that's not including, like rehab or counseling or court fees or attorney's fees or all the costs on the system. But what the guy really needed was probably a good dad when he was 6, and 8, 9, and 12, and 11 to just sit down with him and say, you know what, son, let's talk about how we handle it when we're angry. Let's talk about how we handle things when we're frustrated. Let's talk about the golden rule and why it's important to treat people why we want to be treated and have these discussions with their dad when he's 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10. Well, that would have saved all of the system, society, taxpayers, millions of dollars. And again, that's not the most important thing, but it's measurable. So I'm using it. Not to mention all the spiritual and emotional damage that happened later. If a good dad, and sometimes even a good dad needs to be firm and say, "Hey, you hit your brother, and you've got a consequence. I'm not going to allow that." And when they have those consequences early on, they don't have to experience it 20 or 30 years later. And so the problems that we're seeing today in our civilization, if you go back to the root, they started in overheated or broken homes probably 2 or 3, 4 decades ago. And there's a lot of people hacking at the leaves. Have you heard that theory? There's this saying that says for every 1,000 people hacking at the leaves, there's one hacking at the root. If
Yeah.
you go to the root of the problem is we need good dads to step up. We need good dads to say, "Hey, I'm going to be present. I'm going to teach my kids values. I'm going to teach my kids principles and morals and teach them to do the right thing and the golden rule and teach them how to live without me when eventually I die." And all of these things, if you and I could inspire dads to just say, "Hey, I'm going to put down my phone. I'm going to come home. I'm going to be present. I'm going to just once a day, just listen to my kids and teach them some principles and values and eat dinner with them. And yeah, I'm going to work hard. Yeah, I'm going to do other things, but I'm not going to forget that the most valuable, most influential thing I can do is being there as a dad."
Man,
You
you
can tell I'm
said
pretty
so.
passionate about this. Sorry.
Absolutely, man. As am I. There's nothing better in the world for me than being a dad. It's really the only thing I'm good at. And I'm not even that great at it. It's um, but man, there was a lot there that you said, and I'm going to start with the golden rule. That's something that we don't hear a whole lot. And I love the golden rule. It really is the golden rule. If you treat others how you want to be treated yourself, and everybody did that, we would have a lot less problems in the world. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
another
Yeah,
thing you
you're
said,
right.
another thing you said was eating dinner together. Man, there's just something as simple as just sitting down and sharing a meal together. Shut off the TV, shut off the phones, and sit down and have a meal together. I am very guilty of, turning on the television to sit down and have dinner. But we have started this thing, a couple years ago of just eating dinner together. And I really like it when we do that. I really love eating dinner together as a family and just
That's a
sharing
good idea.
10 to 15 minutes even of time where it's all about the family. And man, there was so much good words and points in what you just said. I just wanted to take those 2 points out of there. The golden rule and eating dinner together. Those two things right there are, if nothing else, give a whole new meaning to the words fatherhood and being there, being present.
Absolutely. Thanks for, yeah, absolutely. And to what you said there, if you take a look at every single law that's on the books, okay? If you take a look at we'll say most laws, we should say, I'm not saying every single one, but most laws, if you look at them and you zoom out 30,000 feet, they're really just saying treat people like you want to be treated. Like, we have a law not to steal, for example. Do you want to be stolen from? Well, that's it spelled out, right? We have a law like don't kill people, don't steal people, be honest, tell the truth, don't defraud. All of that, when you zoom out, is just the golden rule. And so, I tell my kids, I'm like, look, I could spell out 10,000 different ways. Like, don't hit your brother, don't throw spaghetti at your sister, don't do, don't call name. But the truth is, if I just say, you know what, would you want someone to throw spaghetti at you? Do you like it when you get hit by your brother? No. And when we talk about that overarching, like, it's the main big rule, like treat people like you want to be treated. Backing up about the dinner, I think there was even research, and I wish I could name the research study, but there was a study that shows that when you eat dinner with your family, the chances that your kids will take on your values, meaning what you feel is important, go way up. Just the fact that you eat dinner together, right? So you're right. Even if it's just 15 minutes or 10 minutes where you sit down and say, hey, tell me about your day and let's talk for a second, or what did you like, or what was your high point or low point or whatever, and you just have that conversation. That in itself bonds your kids and makes it more likely that your values will that they'll take on things that are important to you as well.
Something else that we've done, as so we've got two older children that are out of the house. So, as a matter of fact, I've got a grandbaby now, so that's pretty exciting. One thing that
Exciting.
we've
Good for
started.
you. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. I'm 39, and when I found out that I was going to be a grandpa, for me it was like yes, cool, and there's a lot of people that I know. Oh, I'm too young to be a grandpa, or I'm too young to be a grandma, and I'm like, go forth and multiply. But yeah, I love large families, and I come from a large family myself, but we're kind of separated. We don't really talk as much as we used to, and that makes me sad. And so now I wanted to try to have traditions that I see on television, or I see with families that I know that are still together after years and years and years of being estranged or separated by distance. We've started every 2 weeks. We do a family dinner with everybody, everyone, in all the kids. We have a dinner. It's on Saturdays that everybody comes over and we enjoy a meal together, whether they live here or whether they don't. Just all the kids, grandkids are invited over to my house, and we do it only every 2 weeks now because of financial constraints. But I would like to do like a weekly dinner at mom and dad's house. That everybody gets together and we break bread together and we go through the week's events, and that way when I'm older and I miss my kids, they'll be here. They'll be around at least once a week.
Sounds like a great idea to me. Sounds like a great idea. Yeah, you
I
should
know a
do
lot of
that.
I know a lot of people that that used to do that a long time ago, and now they're, their families are separated by distance, and maybe they don't get as long as well as they used to. But I got that idea because I'd always see it on television, big families getting together and having, it's usually Sundays on television. They'd get together on Sundays, and no matter how big the family was, they'd sit and have a meal together at this giant table. And for whatever reason, I've always wanted that. And now that I'm older, I understand why we do things like that. It's so that we can continue on that relationship with our children until we do go.
Such a great idea. I like
And then
what you said there.
hopefully they carry on that tradition with their kids.
Absolutely. Super, super awesome. Great idea.
So Christmas is coming up, and in just a few days. And one of the things that we like to do is non-traditional food for Christmas. So we're having lasagna for Christmas dinner. What
Good
do
for
you
you.
guys do for Christmas?
Well, one of the traditions we like to do is we, after the kids go to bed, we have a bunch of lights, and we'll put lights all over the couches, all over the hallway, all over, I mean, everywhere around the house. So when the kids get up, and we do it a little differently. We say they can get up in the middle of the night at about 2 because we need enough time to put all these lights up. But then they have to go back to bed until we get up and all open presents together. I don't want them opening presents until we're all together, but they can come and sneak out. And we usually leave one gift out that's kind of a nice big gift, and then put a put lights all over the house. But they really, really like that. When they get up, it's magical because the house doesn't look anything like it used to. Because there's, sometimes we'll even move the tree and things are all different. And there's like a manger scene and just all kinds of stuff to make it really, really magical for them. And we have a little bit of Christmas music playing in the background. And so when they get up, it's a new world that they haven't seen before, which we like. That's one of our traditions.
I love
Um,
that. I love everything about that.
yeah, it's kind of fun. You can get some lights. Just the little lights you can get from the store. And by the way, if you want to start it next year, you go to the grocery store or wherever they sell lights, like 2 or 3 days after Christmas. You can usually get them for pennies on the dollar, and you can load up for the next year too. So
That's awesome. What man, one of the things that we do on Christmas is we don't go we so it used to be I don't do anything on Christmas Day. And I can't say that anymore because I went and did something on Christmas Day and people will never let me forget about it. But Christmas morning is for my family.
yes,
Christmas Day is for my family. We do the family thing on Christmas.
wonderful.
And how I got really started on that was we come from a blended family, and I'd had multiple family get-togethers to go to when I was a kid, multiple. And sometimes it started arguments, but this person can't be here because they got the family thing over this, and sometimes it would cause arguments. So when I started having kids, I was like, look, Christmas Day, I'm not doing shit. We're at home and that's my kids' day. And
Good for you.
so that's one thing that I've tried to do. And now my daughter, my oldest kid, has decided that she wants to do that with her family. On Christmas Day, they're not doing anything. And so I had to kind of reiterate, told her, look, you can do things on Christmas Day. You can go out and go on vacation or whatever, but Christmas Day is for family. That's for your family and your kids, and make sure that you are there for them. Screw the big families. I understand that, husband's got a family, you've got a family. We all do things on different days. Just make sure Christmas Day is for you guys. And she really took that in stride. And that was one of the good pieces of advice that she said recently that I gave her is make Christmas all about her and her family. And I really love that when people do that and they don't, because holidays aren't for fighting, man. They really aren't. They're for getting together and being happy. So
That's
that's what I
exactly
like
right.
them to do.
Good for you. You're trying to be the change you want to see in the world, which is what we all want to do. So if sometimes our pain is actually a gift to us later because we say, I experienced this and I'm going to try to make it better for my kids and everyone else by doing something different. So good for you.
Yeah, I always wanted to travel on Christmas. I want to go to like New York and Chicago and stuff like that for the big Christmas celebrations. But that's one thing that I'm going to make sure, on Christmas Day, we do the family thing. That's very important that we do the family thing on Christmas Day. And it, to expand on that a little bit, when I'm older and all the kids are out of the house, I'm not going to expect them at my house on Christmas Day. That's for them and their families, unless they want to be here. My door's open. They're always welcome. But unless they really want to be here on Christmas Day, I really hope that they take that day and spend it with their families. So that's one tradition that we have. And then, like I said, another tradition is the non-traditional food on Christmas. And I really, to be honest with you, I don't really like traditional Thanksgiving food either. But that's a whole nother story.
Well, one of the great things about being a dad, and I got to tell you, just that you made me think of, if you're okay here,
Oh yeah,
is that
absolutely.
is that they say that the best outcomes happen when dads, when moms, when parents act as the CEOs of their kids' education. And you touched on this a little bit. You're saying, well, this is how I want to do things, and this is, and it's maybe different than you were raised, and that's okay. The CEO piece, let me just talk about it for a second. A lot of times people just go with what they've been taught and they've seen in the past. So, my parents, for example, somebody says, hey, my parents just took me to a government run school and that's how I was raised. So I'm going to do the same thing. Well, you could do that, and they might have a great school and stuff like this. But let me tell you what I mean when I say CEO. As CEO of your children's education, in my view, you have a right to make your own traditions, like you're saying. You're saying we're going to say these are the traditions that were important for us. We're going to spend together as a nuclear family. We're not going to go anywhere else. You might even take it a step further and say things like, you know what? If there's a school that you want your kids to go to, send them there. But you also have a right to say, you know what? there's something about that that doesn't make me feel comfortable. I'm going to choose to put them in a different school. Or maybe I'm going to choose to homeschool them. Or maybe I'm going to choose to put them in a charter school. Or maybe if I have the funds, maybe I'll choose to put them in a private school. Or maybe I'll do a mix, like literally go in and say, I'm going to homeschool them half the day and I'm going to put them in the other school because I really like these programs. You can hire a karate teacher. You can send them to piano lessons. You can send them to uh, um, I don't know, to learn the viola or the flute or something. I mean, whatever it is that you want to do. But the point is being a dad. A dad is not job is not to be just checked out and just kind of coast and let whatever the system wants to do. As a dad, you have a right to hire, you have a right to fire, you have a right to get contractors that are in alignment with your vision, you have a right to start your own traditions, and you know best what's best for your family. And you know better than people who, I mean, you literally, I just want when dads literally say, I'm the CEOs of my kids' education and the buck stops with me. In other words, I'm the CEO. That means I get the credit, but I also get the blame. And that's okay. So I'm going to do everything I can to give my kids a great life and not need me when I die, as you said at the beginning. And I
Absolutely.
like how, just to being the CEO and saying, hey, I'm gonna do these traditions or we're gonna do these different things. Not that you're being bossy. It's just that you're trying to say, I want to provide the best opportunities for my children. And as a dad, you have that gift, you have that inspiration, you have that
Yeah.
knowledge of what your kids need.
My family kind of really looks at me as a leader. And I didn't really like that role when I was younger. I didn't really know how to fulfill that role of a leader. And how I got to be this way is because I realized nobody else does either. Nobody else knows what the hell they're doing. I mean, if we're being honest, about 90% of the population has no idea what the hell they are doing at any given time. CEOs, presidents, it doesn't matter. Like, none of us really know what the hell we're doing. And if we could be honest about that and have honest dialogue and honest, especially with our kids, and be like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but you know what? Let's go find that answer together.
I
I
like that.
That's how we become leaders, is because I know people are looking at me for the answers. And if I don't have those answers, they're looking at me to find those answers. And so, what I like to do is when people present me with an issue or a problem, I like to help them fix it instead of fixing it myself. I help them find the tools, help them find the answers and where to look for the answers. And I think that that separates me from a lot of people is just being honest. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but let's find out. You know, um, and I think the matriarch and patriarchy of a family is very important. Like you said, kids kind of really do look at us as CEOs. Like, what do we do? What are we doing here? What do we do? Um, for instance, with your with the education, we tell, like, especially in the public school system, we tell these kids that they've got to get up at the crack ass of dawn before God wakes up in the morning, and they got to go to school when it's dark, and they got to be there for 8 hours. We don't really tell them why, you know. Oh, because you've got to learn these things. And so how I explain it to my middle kid is, I don't know why you have to go and get this piece of paper, but you do. And the thing is, like, the reason why they want you to go and get this piece of paper is so they can make sure that you can sit in one spot and complete tasks as you're told to do it. And I don't really care about any of that. What I need is I need you to learn something. I need you to go to class since you already have to be there anyway. You might as well pick something up. You might as well learn something, you know?
Yeah, I hear you. And the truth is, at least in most places, if the school is doing a great job and you feel that the school is doing a great job, you can outsource. As a CEO, you have the right to say, I'm going to send my kid to that school. But I also think that a lot of parents don't realize that they could opt otherwise. I'm not saying I don't know the rules and laws of every place, but there's this feeling in the world in some places that the government owns your kids and you're just a caretaker. But that's exactly backwards. It's,
I,
it's
I
it's
think
not the way it is. You know what I'm
I
saying?
think that's actually how we got to be in the place in society that we are in now, is people gave control to the government.
That's exactly right. You look back hundreds and hundreds of years, most of the time, like everybody was homeschooling. And this government taking over the education piece, to be frank with you, you have a right as a dad to say, you know what? I don't know if that school is doing what I want it to do for my children. And so I'm going to go ahead and pull them out and homeschool them. You have a right to say, maybe we're going to switch to another school. Or maybe, I know of situations where they've said we're going to, and it's usually not advertised because they don't want everyone doing it probably, where they said, I'm going to send my kid to that school for half a day. And then I'm going to do another half where I'm going to take care of some of the things myself. So if you see that your kids are suffering, so like, let's say that your kids aren't learning something that you feel is important, like you want them to learn their times tables, for example, and you can see that the school's just not cutting it. You have a right to pull them out of school and say, I'm going to sit with them and practice homeschool. And we're going to do times tables for a while and we might go back. You have a right to change schools. You have a right to put them in a different school or hire a private school or hire a tutor or whatever it is. But when you take that responsibility as a dad to say, you know what, as a dad, whether or not you get an education or not is not up to the school district. It's not up to the teacher. It's not up to the whoever. It's up to me. And I might, as the CEO, decide to outsource to that public school, or I might not. I might decide to outsource to a private school, or I might not. I might decide to homeschool them part of the time, or all of the time, or I might not. And that's the right that you have. And I think a lot of dads don't realize that. A lot of parents say, oh no, we just have to do the same thing. And the truth is, you don't. And I want dads to realize and step up and say, you know what? Because being a dad, frankly, is going to be the most influential thing you do in the world. It's going to be more than your career. It's going to be more than the things you do in the community. All of those things can be important. Don't get me wrong. You can do great things in the community, great things in a career if you want. But what you do as a dad is going to have more lasting impact. And so to say, I have a right to fire that school. They work for me. Let me tell you this, schools exist at the pleasure of parents. Parents do not exist at the pleasure of schools. Do you understand what I'm saying? So
Yes, I do.
if the school is not providing the type of education that you as a dad feel is important for your children, you can fire them. You can go in there and
Absolutely.
pull them out. And you can say, well, I like this teacher, but I'm not going to do this teacher. Or I'm going to do this. I mean, and you can be nice about it, but I'm saying you have a right to say, I'm going to contract with another provider for my family. Maybe you do want to outsource to the public school because the public school does a great job. And maybe for some reason you feel in your inspiration, your intuition, your dad, spidey sense tells you you need to put him somewhere else. And that's your right. And that's what I want dads to realize is it stops with you. We can't blame the school. We can't blame the school district. We can't blame the government. We can't blame so and so. What we need to do is say, hey, my kids are getting an education and the buck stops with me. And that's the opportunity, the blessing, and it's a challenge, right?
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah.
I agree with you, man. That's you know, I don't know if it is our right, and I don't know if a lot of people
They don't think that
know
way.
that. They may not think that way because of the way the public education system kind of pushes themselves around. We've got compulsory laws here, and which means you have to be in a school of some sort for 90 some percentage of the time or whatever. I don't even remember what the compulsory laws are, but there are compulsory laws. And the reason for those compulsory laws is to ensure that everyone has a fair shot at education. That's what it was for. But what it does is it it incentivizes schools to have asses in the seats, but not much else. They get paid for asses in the seats and not much else.
And for anybody who's thinking about homeschooling, which I've done, let me tell you something right here. I don't know what the laws are there. I know a lot of times if you actually look into it, you still have a right to go in. Again, I'm not saying this I'm not giving legal advice in any way, just so you know. But my understanding, at least in some areas, is you can go in and say, hey, I'm signing that I'm going to make sure I'm taking responsibility for my kids' education. You can homeschool. I know some people who want to homeschool their children. And here's what the research shows. The research shows that the number of turns in a conversation is correlated with intelligence. So, in other words, every time you say something to me and then I respond to you, that's one turn in the conversation. We've had multiple great turns in this conversation on this podcast. But what happens is in a situation, a lot of times you just have a teacher who doesn't care and is kind of teaching and really kind of in a half baked, not quite keyed in way. And it's just drifting over. The kids aren't learning anything. Half of them are messing off. And so there's no turn in a conversation. But if I'm a homeschooling dad, for example, and my son or daughter comes to me and says, Dad, I really don't understand this math problem. And then I say, well, what don't you understand? That's one turn in the conversation. And they say, well, these graphing things with X and Y, I'm just having a hard time figuring them out. And I say, okay, well, let's try one. And we try every time we turn back and forth. You can have more turns in a conversation in a homeschooling situation in an hour or two than they sometimes will get in a day or two or three. And so if you do it right, your homeschooling actually can put your kids miles ahead. Now, some people say, well, I don't know how to do everything. That's okay. Outsource some of it. Like find somebody who
Right.
can, find somebody in the neighborhood or a homeschooling group or somebody who can, or a public school if you want. But if we can start thinking about that as dads, that we're the CEOs and it stops with us, and usually there's some kind of caveat where it's like, okay, I mean, is there nobody in the whole area who can ever homeschool ever or who can ever go to a charter school or a public or private school or something? I mean, there's exceptions that are made. And if you look carefully, a lot of times people can find out that they can do that. Let me tell you, even if you decide that you like the schools and maybe you do and maybe you don't, there's things you can do at home. Um, let me just give you one example. And I'm talking a lot, but you've got me on a track. I'll go. Let me just give you one example. The way we react to things is so important. So, like, if your kid, say you're walking along through the neighborhood, and your kid falls down and skins their knee. So they got a little bit of a skinned up knee. some parents will be like, oh my goodness, you skinned your knee, and oh coochie coochie coo, and like we need to do this. And the problem with that, in my view, is that what you're saying to your kid is you're fragile. You're not really saying those words, but with your actions, with your freaking out, you're saying, oh my goodness, you're breakable, you're fragile. And the problem with that is when they skin their knee and you're not around, they hear your voice in their head saying, oh my gosh, I need to freak out because I've got a little bit of blood on my knee and I'm freaking out. If you were to just act calm and say, um, it looks like you skinned your knee and I've skinned my knee before and it's going to hurt for a while, but you're going to be okay. It's not a big deal. You'll keep going. Then they hear that calm dad. And then when they skin their knee and are not there, they're like, I'm going to be okay. My dad told me, and they hear your voice. It's like they're actually, you get to program how they deal with these problems. So how you react to things like, if they come home and they say, oh, I don't understand this math problem. And you're like, yeah, math sucks. It's bad. They can hear that. But if you just say, you know what, well, let's figure it out together. I love how you said that, where you're like, let's figure it out together. Maybe we can go watch a YouTube video, or maybe we can go get a friend who's good at math or something and figure it out together. Um, and see if we can work it out. So it's important.
That's incredible. I can't count how many people I've taught that to, that, your reaction makes all the difference. And you can even expand on that. And when they're older, and if you show them exactly how to respond to things as they're younger, they'll know how to respond when they're older.
Yes.
And even now, at 39 years old, I still hear a voice in the back of my head, hey, don't do that, or hey, do this. You know,
Yeah.
I I that's amazing, because and something else that I tend to take a beat and see what their reaction is before I react, because I'm, tough and tumble boy dad. I've got three boys and a girl. Um, I I don't tend to give a reaction until I know what their reaction is going to be. Like skin knees and stuff like that, because it doesn't hurt me. I, I'd kind of wait and see what their reaction is, and 9 times out of 10, their reaction is like, oh, they get up and brush it off, no big deal. If you wait and see what their reaction is, because they're looking at you, waiting for a reaction. They're waiting for dad's reaction. They're waiting for mom's reaction. And if you go, that's exactly what they're going to do too. That's very genius. That I never quite put it the way you did, but in the way that you put it, it kind of gives an example on what to do as they get older, and what their mind is going through as they're older, because we can think about how we feel about certain things.
Yeah, I like that. Thanks for sharing that. I have one more just on that same line, and I'll just tell you a little story. I had my 5-year-old daughter came to me, and I live in the mountain, in the Rocky Mountain area, and there's a mountain by our home that's about 11,700 feet tall. So it's a big mountain. People come from all over to hike this mountain. And I like to hike it sometimes. So my daughter came to me and she goes, hey, Dad, I want to hike this mountain with you. And she's 5 years old. Okay. Now, here's the deal. Part of me thought, you know what? There's no way she can do this. She's 5 years old. But I was thinking about this way we react to things. Like, how do we react? And so I said to her, instead of saying, oh, you're too young, you can't do that, which would have just put that thought into her head. What I did say to her was, I said, you know what? This is a big mountain. If you want to hike it, it would take all day. We'd have to leave like early, probably about before the sun came up. We'd have to hike all day. It's a 15-mile hike and you go up thousands and thousands of feet. Do you really want to hike it? She's like, Dad, I really want to hike it. And I said, what are you going to do when your feet hurt? Because they're going to hurt. She's like, well, I'll take a break and then I'll keep walking. I said, okay. I got to tell you, I decided to take her on this hike. And I got to tell you, she made it to the top. This little 5-year-old girl made it to the top of this 11,007. She surprised me. She surprised, and I got to tell you, you've never seen so many people high-fiving her on the way up. And then when she got to the top, there was a group of people that stood up and gave her a standing ovation. And when we got back down, she had this level of confidence. Like, I can do things. And so as a dad, maybe we don't, I'm glad that in this one situation I did it right. There's plenty of times I'm sure I've blown it, right? Where I've said, oh, you can't do that. But when we see the strength in our kids, and so then they come to us and they say, "Hey, Dad, I want to do this, or I want to invent something, or I want to go play soccer and be great." Instead of saying, "Oh no, you can't do that," maybe be the kind of the one who says, "You know what?
Let's go.
Let's go try it." And even if we didn't make it to the top, at least we'd be able to find out together, like you were talking. But then they have the confidence of my dad's there to help me. My dad is going to help me get to the things I want to do. Maybe, let's just say we didn't make it to the top and we only made it halfway. It still could have been a positive experience because I could have been like, "Hey, you made it halfway. That's awesome. You're 5 and you made it halfway." And then when she's 6 or 7, we can make it to the top. But to not have dad shoot him down, that's so important. To have dad be there. Hey, that sounds like a great idea. Let's try it. You know what I mean? In a
Hell
safe,
yeah.
good way, right?
So something similar kind of happened to with us going on roller coasters, actually. I
Hmm.
love roller coasters, absolutely love them. And my middle kid, gosh, he was like 13 at the time. I got him on the Hulk roller coaster at Universal Studios, and it flipped us, turned us upside down, turned us inside out. I loved it. He was terrified, mortified. We get off the ride. He's like, I'm definitely not doing that again. Well, the following summer, we went to a local uh, a local theme park in Kansas City and riding roller coasters there. And we get on a big roller coaster and we get off that roller coaster. He's like, "Man, I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with that." And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "You want to try this one over here?" "Yeah, I do." And so now he loves roller coasters. So now we have to make that return trip back to Universal Studios so he can ride all the roller coasters there. And I
Right.
love that. And the kids are more capable than what we think they are, and they're a hell of a lot more resilient than we think they are too. As like I've had to tell people like, listen, your 2-year old, their knees aren't they don't even have knee bones yet, so you can rest assured if you drop them, they'll be okay. They're not that fragile. um is a bad example, but I like to tell people like kids are resilient, and they'll what doesn't kill them will make them stronger for sure, you know.
But we definitely have a lot more strength in us than sometimes we give ourselves credit for, and our children do as well. And so if we can see that strength and help them build it, I think that's an important thing. And so,
I
yeah,
think that's a
absolutely.
I think that's a great place to leave this conversation, man. EksAyn, I've had a great time here, and I want to reach out to you again in a couple months because there were some things that we didn't get to in this conversation. I want to talk about your daughter Cheyenne next time, if that's okay.
We can definitely have another conversation. That would be just fine. We can figure that out. I did want to ask if you're okay with this. I have something for your listeners. If they'd like, I created a course called Dadfluence, and it's a course it's a 7 week course.
Yeah, tell us all about it,
Um,
man.
and again, I don't have all the answers. We're all trying to figure this out together. But there was a few ideas that I had that I put in there that I thought felt really strongly to share. And it normally sells for like 77, $70. If people use the code word family, FAMLIILY, family, they can just get it for free. It's a 7 week system. That code will probably not be available in the next couple months. But if any of your listeners want to get that, I can send you the link and that code, and they can download it and just see it for free. I'm not. It's just as a gift from me during the Christmas season here.
Can you go through
If
that
you would like.
one more time? We'll have my editor drop all the links in the description. Um, go through that one more time. What's it called?
So it's called Dadfluence, Dadfluence, Dadfluence. And it's a 7 week system. It's a 7 week movement that I've tried to inspire dads and give them some tools to really influence their children for good. And it sells currently for around $77.77. But if you put in the code word family, at least for the next month or two here, you should be able to get it for free. and you can go through the system, and it has actionable tips about how to better influence your children for good. And again, I want to let you know I don't have all the answers. Some of the stuff I put in there is really research based. Some of it's just stuff that I've kind of found out on my own that has helped me. But I wanted to share it with your audience as a gift for them.
That's
And
awesome.
we'll give those notes to you so that you can find it in the show notes.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, EksAyn Anderson. Man, I this has been a great conversation, and sometimes with these podcasts we don't I could go on for another hour or so. But I I think it's a good spot to leave this particular conversation. Number one, so we don't wear out the listeners or whatever on length here, but also because it's pretty much been an uplifting, great conversation. And the next time we talk, I want to talk about love and loss, what it was like growing up without a mom, and what it was like to lose a child. And I can't thank you enough for being here. Thank you very much for coming and hanging out with me. And we'll see you again, man.
Been an honor. And you're a good dad, even though it says coffee bearded bad dad. I think you're a good dad.
Thank you very much. We'll see.
Woo!